Welcome back to the Music Lounge. We are here today with one of my favorite people in the industry. I feel myself lucky to have worked for this guy, and also I feel like worked for him, but also worked with him. He was that kind of boss and a mentor, and we're still connected after, 10 plus years, which just goes to show you there are some good people out there in the industry. Perry, how are you today?
I'm doing well, Andrew. Just as we do at the beginning of every episode, remind people to rate, review, like, and share the podcast. And I also, before I make the introduction for this week's guest, I want to give a little hint to our listeners
Sneak
about
peek.
sneak peek about who we have coming up. And Tom Freston just released his book called Unplugged: Adventures from MTV to Timbuktu. So Tom will be joining us in a couple of weeks. So if you're a fan of the podcast, watch out for that. But today we have the
Drum
former
roll, drum roll.
Drum roll, yes. The former EVP of Multi-Platform Programming and Content Strategy at MTV, Paul Debenedittis.
Hey
Welcome, Paul.
guys. Hello, hello, hello. Nice to see
Welcome
you
to the
both.
lounge.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Of course. I mean what I say. You're definitely a mentor for me. I feel like working with you set the foundation that I've taken through every other role since we worked together. And it was a very special time working at MTV, but also in my personal career as well.
Thanks, Andrew. Appreciate that. Right back at you.
And then I want to know who your top 3 favorite assistants were. I gave you top 3 because I think that is really everyone that I am aware of versus your top 1, which would probably go to Susan.
I was
I
just
like
going
to
to
think I'm
say,
in the top 3.
yeah, I was just going to say, every time Susan's on, she talks about Paul too. So, yes, you've gotten quite a few mentions on the show previously.
Yeah.
Very kind. There's something to be said about kindness, mentorship, and just thinking about who you want to be as a person in the workforce. There's a lot of stuff out there that's just not fun. It's really challenging right now. And I just think of like just the simple kindness, and what that means. It's so much harder to be an angry and just an ass
Yeah.
in the workplace. And
Do
why?
unto others as you would want done to yourself,
It's so
right?
basic,
Something
and
like that.
like I've always had fun and I've enjoyed working with people and, always thought of them as colleagues and partners. And yeah, so we can go on. And I think the concept, then didn't exist now, but people talk about emotional intelligence in the workplace. It wasn't a thing when we were there, but yet it was a thing that we were living and breathing because most of us were friends and enjoyed working with each other. For those that did not work at MTV, like in New York City, it's New York City and the hustle and bustle of Times Square, the intensity of a pop culture network that's moving fast and furious. You developed a rhythm of how to work with each other that was fast. You debated, you argued, and it was in the best spirit and the best sense of debate and argument, and it just made everyone better. You debated, you argued, you moved forward, and then you got a green light, you moved on. We didn't have a lot of time for a lot of other stuff.
We
And that
talk
was our
about
rhythm.
we talk about that a lot on the
A lot.
podcast. And the other factor was there were so many people there with so many different life experiences and different points of view. It wasn't so homogeneous that, your point of view was going to be echoed by everybody there and everybody had buy-in. It could be, again, from the assistant to the SVP. If it was a good idea, it was a good idea. It didn't really
Right.
matter who it came from or where it came from.
100%. And I felt really fortunate to sit in a role where I spent an awful lot of time with the LA office and understanding, their rhythms and what was making them beat. And while they were, part of the whole, they weren't sitting in the Times Square office. So, and they, were in Los Angeles and California. They also had their own identities. So it's really kind of cool to see that all. Meet new people and new cultures and bring it all together. And then not to mention our international partners, which was just probably some of the most rewarding experience because my belief is if you're running an international company and it's headquartered in the US and you're a US based company, the hope is you're hiring the best people from around the world. And to be able to be that person that could work with people from around the world that are bringing their A game, it only makes you like so much better. and the recognition that, you know what, maybe the Americans don't have always the right answer or always the best idea or always the most strategic, like actually like cultivating that from other parts of the world and actually lifting them up and watching their idea become the thing that works. That's pretty cool and really rewarding. And, not many companies can get that anymore.
Let's jump
Yeah,
into
please.
when you first came to MTV. You had told us previously that when MTV came to you, your first response was no. You thought it was cool, but sort of a radio station with pictures. Then you had a conversation with the CEO of MTV at the time, Judy McGrath, that you said change your mind. Take us back to that moment. What did she say to you? Why did it click for you? And what was the evolution that she envisioned for MTV? And how was it not going to be just for music purists any longer?
Yeah, I always go back to this because back then I was at a job. I was at USA Networks. I was there for 9 months, and I'd gone to the VMAs and I met Andy Schoen there, and who was the head of content in Times Square. And they had just also brought in Brian Graydon at the time, and they were both leading. They were like co-leads. And I thought Andy was the coolest guy in the world and smart and man knew the music industry like no one's business. And just to have a moment with him in the middle of the VMA after show chaos was wonderful. And he was
Special, yeah.
really great. And he wound up because a friend of mine worked in HR. He said, "Who's that guy I met? I thought he was really interesting. Like, let's keep talking." And I had like 2 meetings with Andy and then a meeting with Andy and Brian, and I realized like, oh, this is really an interview. They want to hire me. I was really doing the walk and talk because I just wanted free tickets to the show the following year. And now I had connections to like two of the most senior people. And I was again at my job for 9 months. And back then you did not leave your job if you hadn't been there, stick it out for 1 year, 2 years, and you didn't want to be that person. Now that's a whole different mind shift. And I was a little reluctant, yeah, because MTV was more of a music-based service, not like what I would say traditional television, which also made it really attractive at the same time. And Andy and Brian were like, "Paul, you're so like resistant." And I said, "Guys, I just want you to know, I studied my ass off on a lot of the artists in music. I can't say I'm a music purist. I know artists. I celebrate music. I listen, but like, that's like it." And they're like, "Paul, we have plenty of that. We want a TV guy. We want someone that understands TV and we can bring that and we need you." So it's really interesting timing for me. And I was bored at the network I worked at. And I always say it was a learning curve. Go to brands that mean something to you and you feel like means something to other people. The early concept of fandom. And, where I was really bored. I was completely bored and it was killing me. And at least Andy and Brian had such like enthusiasm and excitement. Anyway, so they had me meet with Judy, and we talked, and she understood. She's like, "Hey, so the guys told me you're really not interested in MTV," and I was like, "Oh my god, that's not really what I said, Judy." And we had a great conversation, and there was a moment when I felt her passion, I felt her intellect. I felt like her deep creative and deep business. And I'm like, wow, this is a woman that I really want to get to know and be part of her show. And then she's like, "Look, you have to trust me on something. You're coming in as part of change. We need change. We're struggling. We know we need to change. We need a direction. We need strategy. We have a sense of where we're going. And you will be part of it, but you have to trust me and take a leap of faith that what I'm saying will happen." And I did. And, I joined the company, and soon after, there were a variety of different changes across the team. And then with that, Brian and I set off on really mapping out a strategy. And I was really excited by it all. And I got to meet
How did
everyone.
Judy learn about your career and what you've done at previous networks?
I'm guessing, yeah, thanks, Andrew. I think I'm pretty sure Andy and Brian had said to her,
Well, you gave them the download.
we met this guy, and they had an early vision of what they were looking to do. And don't forget, this was 1997. I came at a time when, let's be honest, for all of those conversations out there about music video, anyone that was part of the senior team was not against music video. We weren't like anti-music video. But the reality is, music videos were across YouTube. They were not a novelty anymore. And people were not sitting waiting for someone to hand them music videos with a bunch of VJ segments. And that was the thing that was so exciting about MTV back in the time. It was beautiful. It was wonderful. We grew up on that. But it stopped. That didn't exist anymore. And the business was in trouble. So like for everyone that's like, oh, MTV stopped playing the music. I'm like, first of all, you haven't watched the network since you were like 20. And you have no idea what's going on in the TV landscape if you're saying that. The reality is nobody was watching.
I also think too there was a big shift happening in music at that time too.
That's right.
It was going from more rock era to the Britneys, the Backstreet Boys, the NSYNCs, and I think the audience that loved the MTV that played the Nirvanas and whatnot was like, what is this stuff? I'm not watching this anymore.
And those artists needed to be seen. They needed a content story. And I think, Paul, you obviously knew MTV was a powerhouse global brand, but you had a vision of where it can go. You wrote a LinkedIn article addressing this, that MTV stopped playing music videos, arrived at a time when video ratings were going down. So as you were addressing, walk us through when you got to MTV and the plan.
Well, I do remember coming from a traditional model of television. I remember setting up like a war room, and a war room is basically your long-term vision as a visual, where you're actually showing people what's going to happen over the next couple of months, maybe a year, and, more traditional multi-year. So a war room. And I remember I had dates and holidays and things that I knew we had a program for and around, seasonal beats. And there was one piece of content that was locked 3 months out. And I remember I looked at Brian, he came into the room and I said, look, and he goes, oh, that's really cool. And I'm like, yeah, Brian, but are you looking at what I'm looking at? He goes, yeah, there's nothing on it. I'm like, yeah. The only thing that we had was animation. And as you know, animation between scripting and storyboarding and illustration, it's a long process. So by its genre default, it actually had to have long-term planning. But look,
and that's where you can see the gaps. That's where you probably saw a gap, and you knew, a rating in a certain time spot was geared towards, let's say, urban, older male teens. Then you have a destination that we need to build upon.
It was a deep dive into data and insights before that was a thing. Back then it was research. And luckily we had a really good leader in our qual and then a good leader on our quant, both the data and the insights. And it helped inform us. Like I mentioned in the article, back then it was all about the millennial. Who are they? What are they? And really understanding what they wanted, what they didn't want, what was making them beat. And over time, we started with the music video strategy, actually, of how do we bring music in a different way. And as such, we had a music development team, which Tom led and he talked about, which was a way in which music can be talked about and showcased as entertainment in a different way. And then there were a variety of different series that celebrated music video and artists. Our big thing was artist access. If you're not really watching the video on a linear platform, what entertainment can we bring you about the music video, about the artist, and the music video itself? And as a result, we had things like Making the Video, which is obviously the classic. We had things like Becoming. We had Fanatic, and a variety of other long-form music series, half-hour specials that really gave you access to artists. And then from there, we set off to look into pop culture and just understand what are people doing? What are the micro communities out there? What's happening in the world that is really trendy and cool, or subculture that is really interesting? And ultimately, at the end of the day, TV is about stories and storytelling. Brian really wisely, because I remember saying to him, we've got to have pilots, we've got to have test tapes, we've got to have something. And what we did was we created a room. And first, I'll say we created a team of talented individuals and multiple groups of development and creative, which was probably the most brilliant thing we could do because there were so many good people at the company. And when I got there, it was really an interesting moment because I don't know if everyone was really supportive of me or Brian at first. It was like, who are these new guys? There was just a reorg. Some people left the company. And Lauren Lazen, I'll give her credit from our news and docs team. She's, a doc guru. She said, she came into the office. She's like, I want to know what you want. And I'm like, huh? Like what's going on, Lauren? And we had barely met. And she's
Had
like,
anybody ever asked you that question before in any of your other jobs?
Not really, because I think the vision was clear and I think it was more traditional, but not in those words. Lauren wanted me to know two things. She wanted me to know that there was a community, a team of people that was a little on edge, that was really good at what they did. And that was her note. She said to me, I'm really good at what I do. There's a lot of brilliant creative people in this room that have their pulse on this demographic, but help us, tell us what you want, and I will bring it to you. And it was really a great conversation because it opened me up to bringing people into the strategy, letting them be part of it. Because, everything Brian and I did, it wasn't like it was the right thing. We presented it to the group. People kind of came on board, shaped it, and, really made it what it became. Then from there, we had to bring this into the room with people who were going to deliver. But you have a question, Barry.
No, I was going to say, because you came in and you're like, okay, you're now tasked with programming 24 hours of this channel, but you don't know news and docs. Like, that's not your background. You had to have somebody there who was going to work with you, but knew that specifically. And it was the same with every other area of the company too. You probably didn't know animation that much
I knew
either at
mostly
the time.
scripted.
Yeah.
Mostly scripted. And I, from a scheduling and strategic point of view, from research, I understood that the questions you had to answer. Obviously, we all could talk about what makes good content or not. And, no one has the right, answer. Otherwise, we all be billionaires, but, and what makes a hit is different. And what we did was we created a programming team, a content team. And it was wonderful because that's early on, we were firing on all cylinders. We got into a room. We created a room where you came in with ideas. I talked through needs. I talked through what was not working and why, what I was thinking from a strategic point of view of what were some holes or opportunities that we should tap into. And the team listened and they all kind of brought their show ideas into that room and presented. I mean, it was fun because you presented an idea, myself included. I can't think of how many shows I said, what if we did X, Y, and Z? And maybe it was, Dave Sorolnik from News and Docs and Tony DeSanto on production.
I think these were ideas that people weren't seeing on other networks and trying to copy. This show is doing really well there. These were innovative. These were groundbreaking first of. So these ideas that we see variations of these shows now on other networks.
Yeah,
you had
really true.
Nothing to kind of base these ideas. So the creativity was just next level.
No one was programming to that audience either. No. There was kids programming and then there was network programming, but no one had the teen audience in mind.
Early on, we had a studio that was really the thriving blood, if you will, in the organization, because we can go in that room I think our meeting was on a Tuesday, if I'm not mistaken. And it was purposely on a Tuesday because you got your weekend ratings on Tuesday morning. They were delayed in those days. And you got Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. It was like a gift on Christmas morning, every Tuesday morning. And then we went into that room. We talked about what worked, what didn't, blah, blah, blah. And in that room, you could throw out an idea. We'd figure out who, what, where was going to do it. Most of the time early on, it was the studio production, who, God bless them, they could turn an idea around, or we knew talent was coming to promote their latest. And we're like, okay, so-and-so's coming in. People would bring ideas in on what they would do with that artist. And we would have content that would be on the following weekend. It was great. And that was our short-term development strategy. As that was sort of building and really working, we then went into more of a long form strategy, which was a lot more time and energy that was devoted to development, to test tapes and pilots, a more traditional model. And, really it was Brian who recognized it in that room with me when we were like, oh my God, we have nothing long term. When he recognized, like, you know what, we've got a thriving creative team. And out of that came so many. If I was to think about every idea that was pitched over the 10 years, we would have like, I would need more hard drive on my Mac. I mean, it was just so many ideas. Brian actually had me do an exercise for the creative leads, Lois and Dave and Tony and Bob Cusbit. And he had me reverse engineer a hit. And I basically was like, okay, to get to a hit, that means you have to have this many at bats, because not every show you launch is going to be a hit.
Right.
So we did like, basically a percentage. And then of that at bats, how many things did you actually have in development that you might have actually done a pilot or a test tape? And then before that, how many ideas did you literally just have on your development slate? So everyone in that room kind of got an assignment of, to get to the hit, what they needed to do in the year as basically their responsibility. So X amount of projects on their slate, X amount of shows that were greenlit. And it was really awesome. And I must say, we had the most collaborative group of individuals that was so creative and really supportive of each other. There's a little competition, and there's nothing wrong with that. Everyone wanted to do their best. You presented your idea in front of the room of your peers. So yeah, there's competition. You want to rock it. But like, someone may have a great idea, but somebody else was like helping that person make their idea even better.
And
You never saw that internally. I never felt it, I should say. I never felt
what I'm
it.
saying?
Yeah, the competition. Like, everyone was really a team effort. Yeah.
The competition was more like an internal thing, and you think about it, like, you want to shine, and it's like, so-and-so's going to be in the room. They're going to bring their A game. I'm bringing in my A game too.
Right,
It was that, Andrew. It wasn't like ruthless.
Yeah, and these are teams also that probably had never been tasked with actually having 50 pitch ideas that would go to 30 development, which would go to 15 test tapes or pilots. And it allowed them to not only be creative, but to think out of the box too. Like,
Totally.
yeah,
I
absolutely.
love seeing shows like the Room Raiders, which was afternoon. Used to have like 30 plus episode seasons. You only took a break because of the production schedule, not necessarily because of a ratings dip. Like, those shows consistently hit.
I'll tell you where that came from. It came from two different places. One is the development team had really great ideas. And we'll talk about TRL, but we were launching TRL and it was a destination. And we knew that our core audience was young and high school kids who were coming home, and frankly, even middle school to some degree, but that wasn't our core. But though we wanted them because they were aspiring to come into the demo, and then we could sell against that. And don't forget, like I mentioned, our sales team at this time, they were struggling. They were like some of the most strategic, wisest sales force out there representing the MTV brand. They were selling brand and brand association. You can only sell brand and association for so long. You really have to start delivering. And I'm sure they had conversations over and over again saying, the audience will be there. The audience will come. Here's another idea. Be part of it. And they did that for a long time. And at some point, they were giving up make goods because we weren't hitting our numbers. And it was a challenge. It was really an issue. And because we were MTV networks, each of the networks could actually take some of the burden off of the challenges of the undersell of the other networks. But the sales team, bless their heart, they finally were like, guys, like, you got to fix this. So this is my way of saying, when we realized what it was going to take to change, we knew we needed content. We knew we needed hits. But let's face it, we're a 24-hour network. you're not programming 24 hours of original programming. At most, a couple of hours, if in a good day, you needed to make that budget work. And to actually have a rating that was stronger than the previous week, you really had to change the trajectory of what that content was, not like 1 hour, multiple hours. So that's when we got into how could we take TRL and extend it longer on an original block, because nothing is better than a strip. A strip is Monday through Friday programming to change the overall. It's a numbers game to change the numbers. And I want to say it was Calissa Miller in the beginning, who, God bless her, she was our savior because she kept delivering these strips, Monday through Friday programs. And they were not designed to be that. They were designed to be weeklies at first, but she figured out how to make that budget work. I remember there was a moment of panic and I'm like, you know what? I don't need an original Monday through Friday. I only need 4 episodes a week because I'll package up Friday and stunt and whatever. Just give me 4. Friday, I'll repeat. And that got us a whole other week of original programming over the course of a production. But Andrew, to your point, we had Room Raiders and Dismissed and then Date My Mom and Boiling Point. Like all these really fun series that no one else was doing because no one else was capturing what it was like to be a 14 to 18. And I'm going to say the sweet spot is probably like an 18-year-old, maybe that senior in high school, freshman in college, those that aspire to be in that space, and those that look at it like those are the best years of their life.
You mentioned TRL earlier, and that was also another way for you to sort of package music into a different type of experience for the fans that were watching MTV. TRL was really a cultural phenomenon. It was a daily ritual for these kids, 8th graders to freshmen in college, who wanted to feel closer to the music and to the artists that they love. You called it the first mass interactive platform before social media existed. Break down what made TRL so powerful, and also, do you see any parallels from what TRL was doing 25 years ago to what TikTok is doing today?
Sure. I mean, back then it was the curator of culture for, teen, maybe even tween. It was the place. It was like your hangout. You went and it was something for you with a show and a personality that's, in our VJs that spoke to you. It was like a club and it was belonging. And
the live audience helped present that too.
Live audience,
and the fact that you could influence what you were seeing too.
100%.
Yeah.
You were part of the process. You could call, you could talk to talent, you could make the video.
You could go down to Times Square and wave out the window. It was interactive.
I remember like somebody complained once from another network in the building about the noise and the craziness. And I'm like, you really have to come. No, my note was, you really have to come to me when that noise doesn't exist, because then we're in trouble. You know, like, be happy. But anyway, it started out, I got there at the time when they were building that studio, and it was amazing. The team before me and the team that was still there built that studio. It was a great space. It was really smart, but it was really interesting for me because the studio is like a set, right? And if you think about television, I had never come from a place where somebody was greenlighting a set before a show. Now, look, it's not like they said, we're going to build this and who knows what we're going to do. That's not true. They knew that we needed a production facility that could, have space for talent and have the, eyes on Times Square, various uptown, downtown studio that can, accommodate. So it's like, it's not like they didn't know what they were building, but we didn't really have the show. At the time, I think it was MTV Live. And then we did, I remember early on, it was Live at 5 or something like that. And for me as a programmer, the worst thing you could possibly do is stick me with a time or a number in a show, because things have to move. You got to move with the audience. If the audience is not there at 5, you got to move. And some places in the rest of the country do the daylight savings time, whether they observe it or not. It's not 5 o'clock. So that was weird to me. And, the team early on, I think it was, Bob Cusbett and team, came to TRL, and they really formatted that show to be this interactive show, to bring access to talent, to be the place you came home from school. I think we moved it as early as 4. And then when we extended it to 90 minutes, I thought, let's go at 3:30 and let's make it that thing you run home and you have to see. It was, must see television. And it worked 5 days a week. And, it was fantastic. A lot of artists, I could talk to what it was, but I'll let other people talk about that. But it was definitely our cornerstone hit. It was, the thing that kept us going Monday through Friday.
And we talk about it in lots of other episodes about how TRL was the epicenter of pop culture. It was music, it was fashion, it was celebrities, it was movies, it was TV shows, it was just who you wanted to see every afternoon. It was, like I said in the sort of question and in the intro, it was what you would get in your social media feed today, but it was only in one place for this hour every day. And it was incredible, right?
Yeah, totally. It was early influencer content when you think about it. I know even when I went to Disney later on in my career, I actually reached out to Tony. We tried to do a TRL like show, and we realized in the piloting that it was less about the show itself and more similar to music videos. Was that moment where I'm like, I don't think this is the show for this generation anymore, because the culture and the way in which people were absorbing content and fandom and all that other stuff had changed, similar to the learning that we had that people weren't watching music videos on a linear service anymore. They were watching it on YouTube. I think the beauty too of the team, when I bring up sales, there was a time early on when everyone thought we were just the creative, folks with the crayons, and we didn't understand the business, and we didn't know the ratings that were at risk. And it was almost like a house divided. That's not a fun place to be in.
Right.
It's not a fun place to be a leader in. And it doesn't need to be like that. It's like going home and mom and dad are constantly arguing. And if hopefully that's not happening in your household. So we came into this, like, how do we let others know on the business side, on the sales side, on the senior management, that we got this? And Bob Cusbett created his father-in-law's name, if I believe the story. His father's name was Walter. And we created the meeting. They changed the name of our programming meeting every week to Walter, which stood for We All Love to Earn Ratings. And it was like our mantra of, we're all in this together. We all want to win. We know if the ratings are there and the revenue is there, we're going to get more money to do what we all love doing. So, and speaking of money, we had a good budget, and we knew how to make that budget work. And we knew how to, make sure we used every dollar and used it wisely. We took a lot of risks, which I don't think a lot of companies are willing to do anymore. You can't succeed creatively if you don't try like the most random, ridiculous thing out.
It was so important for us to have the consecutive quarter after quarter in every demographic, the number one spot. You recall taking a step back ever and being like, wow, like we've actually made it to the number one network consistently in every demo that we want. And when I came in, you were like, things were in trouble financially and kind of programming and ratings. And then you get to a point a number of years later where you're like, wow, this is it.
I'll say two things. Look, you're in the TV business and you're only in it for so long in any network. And I feel like you come in as what's the word I'm looking for? As the guide for that moment of time, as the brand. There's another way of saying it. And it's not forever. The ups and the downs. But the beauty was that we came from a turning point in culture, or turning point in the organization. And, you celebrate the teamwork and the collaboration that goes on when things suck, and you're trying to bring it together. And man, when you have those highs, it just makes it all that more, special.
And we knew how to celebrate.
Yeah. I will say there were moments that I've never had in my career since, where we were more successful than we needed to be. And, I remember going for, my MBA which I didn't finish. But one of the things was about managing success and, managing a business. And the reality was there were moments when ratings came in for the week and we were like 20% ahead, at the head of last year or the head of last week.
It's going to make
And
things even harder
it's a
the
nice
next
press
quarter.
point,
Yeah.
but does that press point need to be 20% or does it need to be 10? Does it need to be 8? Because the reality is sales is only selling what you deliver. If
Yep.
you're not going back to the advertiser and saying, oh, I sold you a 1 and we're at a 2, you're not getting that. So you're kind of wasting your money. So for, I'd say a few years, I was actually managing success so that we could spread the success out longer and frankly have the budget and the content to do what people wanted to do. Because if I let it all happen too soon, somebody would come in with a great idea and I'd be like, we don't have the budget to do another one, So it was a bit of, managing that level of success, which was awesome.
That's crazy
And,
that you say that, to be in that position.
yeah, it was really cool. And I remember there were moments like I felt like I wasn't doing a good job because I thought I was. And all of a sudden, like something hit, and you can only do so much predicting and estimating. And then sometimes things just hit. But there were moments when it was like hitting too high. And I'm like, oh my God, I have to slow this down. Slow it down, but still stay successful. And we went on to over 18 quarters of like number one and with success. And it was great. And it was a combination of, again, like the strategy, the creative force within the organization. We had a great marketing team that supported the content. We were, thriving. And then we also took like traditional things that, we had, like Spring Break, for example, had been an MTV staple for a long time. And again, a lot of it was music video based with packaged VJ segments. And we turned that into a creative force. The team used it as a development tool. There were shows that the team came to that they would do as half hours at Spring Break. And if successful, they would then become the shows that we would greenlight for our summer beach house. And we did that for a number of years. And it was a really great way to spend the money on development, spend the money on production because you had a budget for, Spring Break content, and then use that to then fuel what would be summer hits. And then what was happening, you weren't just launching a new show. You were launching like a fun, crazy, outrageous show that you saw only a couple of months ago. And now we're going to do it a couple times a week from the beach house. So that was really fun.
Talking about greenlighting shows. A lot of our listeners, ex-MTV people that were there, knew about the Offsite, the creative retreat that we held at Montauk. It was a place where you saw pilots and test tapes and basically shows that were brand new greenlit that you were presenting to the people that were going to help launch it. You had talent show up. You had Nick and Jessica from Newlyweds.
Yeah.
Just, I heard a story that Britney wanted only to arrive by a helicopter, which, it is the Hamptons and that's really how you get there. But take us into, you kind of owning that process and what it meant for the company to not just be there and have fun and feel like you were kind of part of that movement, but just how important it was to get everyone together.
Yeah. Well, early on, it was really important. And early on, we had offsites like a lot of companies would do, but they were a small group of us that were leading the charge for MTV. And those were hard meetings. We deliberated, we debated, we had some hard conversations to figure out who we were going to be, what we were going to be, and get everyone on board. Once we said, this is it, okay, we're it, move on. There were a few music purists in the room. And, I remember having some tough conversations where I'm like, look, like, this is the strategy. Like, I'm leading it, I'm helping, I'm guiding it, but you're delivering on it. And you're either with it or not, because at this point, the debate is over. We can still talk about it to kind of fine tune, but we're moving. Like the bus is moving. Be part of it and contribute to it. And it'll change over time. It'll evolve. But there were, a few people that were just not on board. And it was not pleasant, but that's the nature of business, of disagreement and fundamental disagreement. But those early offsites were where we really mapped things out, and then over time they grew, where frankly we used them as our development cycles. We basically had a 3-tier development cycle throughout the year, and each moment was designed to have content for summer, fall, and I'm going to say winter, if you will, because those were our seasonal beats of when we would launch new shows. And if you had your project ready, you brought it to the offsite. And at the time, it was smaller. Those are my favorite moments, because that's when you're like, I work for the most creative people in the world who are just awesome. And you're sitting and watching television.
Amazing.
And we'd also have our international team come and bring their projects. And you'd watch the show, and getting feedback from about 20 people to 30 people in the beginning, and listening to different points of view of what they saw, didn't see, what was working, not was working. It allowed us all, and God bless Brian, because he really heard everyone. He had his own point of view. He's kind of like the content guru. He sees things and gets it. And he would have the most brilliant responses back, and we'd all be like, right. But out of that room, he was bold enough to basically say green light or no green light, and why. And you got your marching orders out of that room. You didn't wait. It wasn't like the long strung out, I'm debating. A pass is a pass, and a green light is a green light. And
well, the other thing too is at that time, also network pilots were you did them in the spring, they were reviewed in the summer and programmed in the fall. You guys were speeding up that process so much more than anybody else was doing too.
Yes, some were, not necessarily in that cycle. They had longer periods of time. But what it enabled me to do was have that war room with content that we could look out to. And now we're firing. So don't forget, we had holes relative to what was working or what was working. I remember along the way, the Viacom, MTV Networks, Paramount Global, whatever you want to call it, went through multiple names, acquired WWE across the portfolio of networks. And we were the recipients, if you will, of Sunday Night Raw. I'm not going to say we wanted it, didn't want it, but it was kind of given and said here. And suddenly it was like, wait, Sunday night at 7. Okay. What does that mean? Okay. There is a huge fan base of a demographic, of not just an age, but where they come from in America, who they are, what they like, what they don't like. And we had to think about that and spend a lot of time. Who are they? What are they? At the time, we also had Jackass in development. So it was really a moment where we were able to say, you know what, Jackass Sunday, we're moving it there. And over time, we developed shows that were specifically targeted with this audience in mind. We were also getting to a point that we were almost tipping the scales of being too young girl. So this was a really great balance. And I kept saying, I need to have at least an hour of original programming after that. It would be crazy not to. Somebody was handing you an audience, and it worked for a long time. Kevin McCall and our marketing team came up because we wanted titles for destinations. And he gave it the Sunday Stew, which was really fun. And he packaged it in a way that made sense. We also put music into the block in an effort to bring new music to viewers. So music discovery was part of that block. But going back to the creative retreat, so then it expanded, because once something's working, you realize you needed your partners in the room. We needed finance in the room. We didn't want to go to them after the fact and say, hey, here's what the budget looks like. We wanted them to see what was happening. We wanted marketing rep to be in that room so that they were part of the green light too, because you learn early on that you want to bring people into your success, because you know what? If you don't bring them into your success, you then own failure alone. But if you bring people in, they're all a part of it, and they're contributing to what can be, because they were there from day one. So we would bring various people in the company, and that grew and then grew. And then finally we're like, we need to make it bigger. We need to get somewhere. Let's face it, if you know New York City, there's not a lot of places that are good retreat to get away from the world. Montauk felt like it's literally at the tip of Long Island. But it was enough to take a drive that we can go out there for a couple of days. We got a good budget.
Or a helicopter.
Or Helicopter. They gave us a really good deal. And we invited a large segment of the company over the first year. And then the second year was even bigger. It got so big that I actually had to use other hotels. And if you know Montauk back then, there's not a lot of glamorous hotels out there. And
Yeah.
Montauk for itself is a beautiful location. But at the time, it wasn't really like glamorous. It's like a rustic seaside resort. But
Yeah.
it gave us the ability to hide away for a couple of days, do our thing internally. Like many offsites, it also created relationships that didn't exist that were really important. And you felt like you were part of it from day one. But it also, for me, it was like a show, because suddenly, like, I'm bringing a lot of people out here for a couple of days, and I'm not the one creating the pilots, but I'm creating the environment now to do this, creating the agenda, how we're going to have the meetings. Thought leaders were brought in for, special guest presentations. I did fireworks one night, which didn't really actually work off too well. That was a wild moment. But I do remember I had the creative director gave me a couple of ideas, and I said, listen, this needs to feel like the audience. And early on, I always was told from like early mentors, like, you need to live and breathe like the demo and the audience that you are serving, do deep, rich, immersive dives. You're never going to get it. So one of the things we did was we made the stage a teenager's bedroom. So when you
So
presented
crazy.
your pilot and your project, you were literally in a bedroom. And it was cool. I thought it was fun. I think people had fun with it. But you sat on a bed. That was where you sat to present the show. And it just personified who we were talking about and who our consumer was. I remember that everyone rehearsed, a lot of people brought talent, because we got to the point that if you wanted your pilot to pop, man, have the talent that was part of that show presented. And we had a pilot called Newlyweds with Nick and Jessica. We all knew who they were, but they weren't doing a lot at that time. And they were running late to the rehearsal the night before the screening. And I had people on overtime on, the AV side, because we wanted to make sure it was a production, it was a show, the audio, the lighting, everything needed to be perfect. The people presenting them from lowest currency, I think it was Rod Asa, I'm pretty sure it was Rod Asa. We had food waiting for them, and they were tired, and they got there and they, brought them to the room. They're like, oh, I love this set. This is so cool. I'm like, okay, we've got the team. We're ready for you to rehearse. And they're like, rehearse? Like, we don't need to rehearse. I'm like, you kind of do, because I learned if you're hosting a show, you better make sure nothing's a surprise to you.
Right.
No presentation, no pilot. You better see it all, even though you trust your colleagues. You're still putting on a show, and you don't want it to go to air before you see it. Anyway, they performed for like all of like 45 seconds. I'm making that up. I'm sure it was a full song. It was like magic. And I just remember thinking, oh my God, not only are they absolutely spectacular and charismatic and this beautiful, I have them at an overflow hotel that is literally like a motel, because we don't have any space for them. But nothing I could do. But, those are the days. We also had Brittany, God bless Tom Calderon, because I kept asking, we need to have more talent. We need to have somebody perform, whatever. And he went to the top. And at the time, Brittany.
Nobody bigger at the time. Yeah.
He's like, yeah. He's like, Paul, we got Brittany, but do you have a budget to get her here? I'm like, yeah, we can get her in a car, in in an SUV. I don't think she wants to take the Long Island Railroad. He goes, yeah, I don't think she's doing that. I'm like, oh, you want a helicopter, don't you? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, done. I'll figure out how to make the budget work. We'll take something else away. Not realizing, shame on me, because it really was not good planning. But if you're flying someone in, it means you're flying them back.
Yeah, yeah.
I hadn't budgeted for the return, but she performed, which is really cool. And it was, look, we had great content that came out of that room. I think we also had this energy that helps when you go back to the office, Monday through Friday. People are on that high, and you're delivering at your best, at your A game.
Yeah.
If you weren't the one making the show and you were the one in marketing, you were supporting it. No matter, we had legal in the room, business and legal affairs. Like, everyone was there that touched and contributed to what then had to happen once we greenlit shows.
That's one of the most important things coming out of it. Yes, you have an amazing show idea, but I think internally, the energy is everything you're saying for people to experience that, to feel part of it, and then to come back and energized.
Do you think networks or streaming companies are doing these kinds of retreats anymore?
I don't know. I would imagine companies, you do them based upon need. We needed it because we were in the beginning a new team coming together from all different places, and we really needed to form a solid working relationship. And then it became the business of what you're doing. So part of it is, I don't think a lot of people are willing to spend the money, but the large companies have conferences all the time that spend a ton of money on their conferences. A lot of it is relationship building, and it's sometimes it's underestimated. And there was the business also of the work that we had to do. But I will say we moved from Montauk to Bacara on the West Coast because I wanted to be fair to the West Coast people and not always have everyone flying out from LA to come to New York. We did them in Bacara in Santa Barbara, and it was great. We got a really great rate. I negotiated a great rate for the hotel.
I mean, that place was like a celebrity hideaway spot,
It's
like a
beautiful. It's a
Madonna.
beautiful resort.
Yeah, it was sick.
But we're there like Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, so they were happy to have us because
Right.
who's going to a resort filling it. And my goal for the creative team was we can't have these makeshift conference rooms that serve as a screening room. The video is great, the audio is great, but it's not, I'm just going to say good. It was not great. And finally, I found a location that had a screening room where the audio was
It was
unbelievable,
incredible. Yeah.
sound, visual. So for me, it was like I'm giving a gift to this creative team because they've worked their ass off and now they're presenting. And we're going to be in that room for like 2 solid days, 8 hours each, watching content. You want to make sure your content is being presented in the best possible form. So that was a really great move to go there. It also allowed us to kind of rethink what it would be. We still needed to have the business of meeting together as a team, talking through the challenges, what we were going to do to fix it. But I do remember it's also where we first saw Laguna Beach. And I'll never forget the moment because Tony DeSanto, Liz Gately, and Adam DeVello, God bless them, they found something that not only did they believe, they knew we would all believe. And I remember like saying, where's the DVD? I haven't seen it yet, Adam. He's like, talk to Liz and Tony. I'm like, Liz, Tony, where's, they're like, Paul, you know what? You got to trust us. We want you to have the same experience as everyone else in the room. You've never had that. You've always watched everything in advance to make sure, trust us, this is good. And let me tell you, when we all saw that pilot, we were like, it was magic. It was beautiful. We hadn't seen anything like it before. No
Yeah.
one was capturing youth culture in this scripted way. Excuse me, this unscripted way.
Oh, did you just give something away there, Paul?
Not at all. It was, and Liz was like, at the time, the OC was on, and Liz was like, well, we can do like the unscripted version of this. And it was magic. And none of us knew how big it was going to be. I'd be lying.
And it wasn't, I mean, yes, it was youth culture, but it was the casting, the way it was shot, the way it made Laguna Beach look. I mean, it was something, it was a show that you had never seen on MTV
Right.
before.
And the pacing was like second to none. And the ABC stories, that were going on just created intense drama, was very real. And you might be the kid in any part of the country that you might be having like similar stories, except maybe your life wasn't as beautiful as living in,
Right.
Laguna Beach,
Laguna,
California.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
don't forget, that's another place where we infuse music into the soundtrack of Laguna Beach is like the soundtrack to your life those years, because the music was some of the hottest artists or some of the new artists that you were discovering because of Laguna Beach.
Yeah. And it also led to another one of MTV's biggest hits, The Hills.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, totally. It was a great moment. But I always remember, the offsites, the creative retreats, they were really great moments. It's actually where I got Is that it over there? Can you see?
Yeah, I can
Yeah.
see
I
it.
got my Moon Man from Judy McGrath because she felt like I was producing an event that was award winning and should be award winning. And she came up to me afterwards and she's like, isn't this incredible? Talk about, I think you asked about, do you ever sit back and think about how fun and successful? She goes, remember that day you sat in my office and you were like, I don't really know if I should be coming here. She goes, how does it feel now? And
Yeah.
like, it wasn't like her saying like, how does it feel really? It was more like, aren't you glad we did this?
Right,
Like, and
right.
she was so invested in it. And the fact that she came to these retreat, I think she came to two, was a statement because it became more of a company offsite
Mhm.
than the content retreat.
Typically, in this point of the conversation, we do a lightning round where we ask about first concert, first album, things like that. We're going to switch it up with you a little bit. I know that you've had some
We
celebrity
want these quick
contacts.
answers, Paul. Quick.
You've had some celebrity contacts over the years, especially during your time at MTV. I'm going to throw a few names at you. I just want to get your take on them. You ready?
Okay. I have a
All
limited
right.
amount, but let's see. Let's go.
Okay. Jennifer Lopez.
The most charismatic, loving, and kindest person. We did a project with her. I was in a room with her when they were pitching. And then at her event, I remember she came and hugged me and she's like, thank you, Paul. And I'm like, how did she even remember my name from like 3 weeks ago? But I thought she was just pure energy and kindness and so charismatic and gorgeous.
I bet she
Madonna.
smells good too.
And there's my picture with her.
Oh, Madonna.
I only had one moment with Madonna. Over the years, I tried to, if I didn't have to and I wasn't required, I didn't push my way in because I also didn't want to ruin my feeling of who an artist was because suddenly I saw some of the behind the scenes. But
Yeah.
there were one or two moments, and I thought she was brilliant. Like when she spoke in a creative way, she knew what it was she wanted, what she was doing. And if she didn't have the answers, she knew how to ask the question. And you kind of knew, like, okay, shut up. She's got this. Like, it was great. I remember once she like actually said, what is your name again? And she asked the question. And I was like, oh my God, don't do this. And I didn't really agree with her, but it was like, how do you say you don't agree in a way that you agree?
Right. Exactly.
Or
Exactly.
enhance what she's saying to kind of get closer to what you're thinking. So that was it. She absolutely brilliant.
Britney.
Britney was in a moment and owned that moment. And I also think, unlike Madonna, she knew her seat at the table.
Was it at the Montauk with the offsite?
Oh, no, I'm
Another
talking
time.
in more creative sessions in a room. She just knew her seat at the table, and I'll leave it at that.
Pink.
She came to, was it spring break? Raw talent early on, raw talent. And she remains one of my like top artists.
Gwen Stefani.
I loved Gwen. I was a big fan of No Doubt and liked her a lot. We decided that it would be really cool to figure out other cultural moments going on and how could we tap into them. So we did a Mardi Gras in New Orleans and she performed. And it was right around the time that she was getting engaged. And I think I was like the most senior person. So they're like, Paul, you have to come to this dinner. I'm like, really? I want to go out with the colleagues. And the next thing I know, I'm sitting next to Gwen Stefani and she was gushing about Gavin and she was so real and, so in love. And I talked about my relationship. She talked about hers. I didn't really like her engagement ring. So that was a hard poker face. And she actually knew, she's like, you have the worst poker face.
Sharon Osbourne.
I didn't really like talk to Sharon so much as in the same room, like we didn't have like one-on-one, but she was a tough mother, like tough in a sense of she wasn't gonna like sweet talk you. She was a lovely individual, but she was tough. She knew what she wanted, and she was so protective of Ozzy and her family. And there was something so admirable about that. But she was like a brilliant businesswoman and just tough as cookies. I remember someone said something like, not quite derogatory about Ozzy at one of the Television Critics Association. And she's like, that's my husband you're talking about. And like, she went right at him and defended him. And I'm like, go for you, because that's what you should be doing.
Absolutely. Last one, P. Diddy.
Well, Michelle Dix, who's from the music department and production with Tom Caldron, there were two Paul Debenedittis at the company, my cousin and I. He was over on digital. But, our last name is not easy. And so Michelle nicknamed me Paul Diddy. And when I was introduced as Paul Diddy, I don't think he really loved the concept. But then later on, I think he recognized, he's a smart guy. He recognized what I did at the company. And he was like, oh, I'm going to go talk to Paul Diddy. And I'm like, oh, suddenly he likes my name. Anyway, that's enough on that.
Is that where he got it from? Well, we're coming to the end. You've had a career that, brought MTV out of the trenches to somewhere like 18 consecutive quarters of growth, as you said, nearly $1 billion in annual revenue. It was a strategic business impact. It wasn't just a creative success. So quickly, looking back at what you built at MTV and what you're doing now, what are the core lessons from that era that still applies today?
It's really interesting. When I worked, I went to Disney after MTV, and I learned really quickly because someone had asked me, they're like, we want to hire you, but we now have to defend the hire, and you need to give us more because people are going to say you're not a kids specialist, you're a youth, more like teen and young adults. And what could you say? And I'm like, look, at the end of the day, I used to look at your audience. They were our number one competitor because they slowly were going to age in. But I'm going to be so academic about learning the kids' side that I'll be equal to all of your colleagues, if not better, because I'm going to be forced to learn and listen. I think the number one thing like I learned there is like I came in and I just really asked a lot of questions. Like, you come in with a plan because they're hiring you based upon your ideas. And then you kind of have to say, okay, I have the plan. And you have to accept that it's not going to be the same when it's time to execute and build your tactics to execute against. You just talk to everyone, and you not only talk to learn, you talk to make people part of it. I didn't want it to be mine and Brian's strategy. I wanted everyone to own it. And, thank God we had great people in Dave Cyrilnik and Lois Curran and Tony DeSanto, Robin Alpern DeMarco at the time, who was like my right arm and everything. We were all part of it. It wasn't two people creating a strategy in a room by themselves. So that is, to me, like something I bring forth. Like I went to Disney and then I went back to Viacom to work at Nickelodeon. And it was wild to like go back into that building and be part of the organization again. And there were things that I felt like they were doing really successful, more so than they had when I was at Viacom previously. And then there were things that I was bringing to the table that were like, wait, I've now been elsewhere. There are things that you could be doing better. And it's like, how do you bring in best practices so that it just becomes the new way of operating, if you will? But you're not you don't want to go in and change everything.
Right.
Yeah.
Paul, amazing. Thank you so much. Great catching up. It's been an amazing hour. Hope you feel it too.
Great to see you both. Yeah, it's always fun talking about this and thinking about, like, for anyone that's been part of it, like, why did it work? What didn't work? What would you do differently? And then how do you bring that into whatever else you're doing down the road?
It's funny because we talk about it being a magical time. Everything sort of coalesced with the right people, the right programming, the right era, the right music, all of that came together. And it was something that you can't really replicate, only because the audiences are so, their attention is so many different places now.
It's not that you can't replicate everything, because what you don't go somewhere else or try to replicate it, because the end of the day, culture moves, culture shifts, audience shift. That's why I wrote that article. Like, for people that were like talking about the demise of, I'm like, here's things MTV could do if they think about the demographic of Generation Alpha and who they are. They are not the same generation that was part of the audience constituency that we were serving
Right.
at that time. And to go in with that same model, you're going to fail up front because the audience is not doing the same thing. I am excited about Generation Alpha a lot, about who they are and what they are. And I like encourage anyone that's like thinking about content, thinking about a business, thinking about product, lean in and understand this audience, because they're going to be the mass audience in a very short period of time. They're already making the decision in their household. They're working with influencers because that's how they're making their decisions. The way in which they consume content is not the way we consume content. I fear for studios that are just going to keep doing the same thing, thinking they can pay
Absolutely.
the same billion-dollar salaries to artists. That's not it, because I don't think Generation Alpha is going to think that way when they want to see a movie. They don't necessarily want to see tons of long form. It's the creator economy is very different. So I just say lean in and understand this audience and watch them as they evolve. And what we know about them today may not be the same thing over the next couple of years, but follow them because you're serving them. They're your consumer.
It's also the first cohort that will be AI native too.
100%. Yep.
Yeah.
Good point. Good point.
So,
Well,
thank you again, Paul. We
thank
really,
you.
really appreciate it. And again, just to close out, please rate, review, like, and share the podcast with anybody that you think would enjoy it. And we will be back again soon. Thank you for listening.
Bye, everyone.
Bye now.